Hello everybody, hello and welcome to this part 2 of Things They Don't Explain in Guild Wars 1. Today we are going to be talking about general game mechanics that are pretty much never explained in the game, like ever. 90% of them at least are not. They are niche things, you can read about them in detail on the wiki if you want to, but I'll try to summarize them as quickly as I can and as concisely as I can. As always, you can find timestamps for different chapters in the timeline and in the description, probably. And without further ado, let's get started. So, first and foremost, very, very basic stuff. We have health, we have energy. Those are our primary resources that, if we run out of one, we're probably going to have a bad time. They can regenerate and degenerate. And the cap on either side is 10. So your HP can regenerate to plus 10 these arrows. You see those like tiny arrows? They're called pips. So you can have up to plus 10 on the right or up to minus 10, on the left. The important bit is that they don't correspond to, a general metric of 1 to 1 per second. As a matter of fact, one arrow in your health regen or degen, I'll be talking about just one side because they're identical in either way. One arrow on either side regenerates 2 HP per second. So if you have 10 of them, you regenerate 20 HP per second. And with energy, one pip is, I believe, 1 energy per 3 seconds. So in my case over here, I regenerate 3 energy per 3 seconds. So it roughly sums up to like 1 energy per second, right? And you could see that right here if I cast something like this, for example. You see that, it's not going up super slow, super fast. It's pretty much like 1, 2, 3. It pretty much matches. So, with that said, there are a few important things to know about degen and regen. As I said, the cap happens at 10, plus or minus, but you can have, let's say, I have here this plus 4 health regeneration, right? Let's say I use this skill, and I get my plus 4, and somebody else uses another skill that is plus 9. Cool. That will be, plus 13 in total. If you want, it's 4 plus 9. 13, but I'll get only 10 out of it as a benefit, right, because of the cap. But if you have somebody who applies a condition on you, for example, let me quickly, sorry for that, let me quickly get myself burnt. You'll see my health degenerate quite a lot, right? If somebody, let's say, gives me a -4, right, on this, or actually for the interest's sake, -5. I have -5, then I use my skill, and then I get somebody else's skill, and the total math becomes -5 plus 4 plus 9, which is going to be plus 8 total, right? Because it effectively cancels out my 4 and also it subtracts 1 more. What I'm saying is that the cap applies after the math is done. So if there's a lot of different modifiers happening all at once, they will all calculate, and then if you exceed a cap, the cap will be applied, right? So keep that in mind. It is pretty cool, but also, a bit gimmicky. It is also important to know that this damage or healing on the health does not count as damage and does not count as healing. The reason I say that is because, for example, look at this skill. You don't have to read the entire thing. Basically, it inflicts burning whenever the target takes fire damage, right? I just got burnt, and if I had this skill applied on me, I wouldn't be continuously burning. This wouldn't be like a self-triggering loop, because this doesn't count as actual damage, right? It just counts as regen, but not damage or health. So yeah, that's an important detail. Now, there is one more resource in the game. Actually, kind of two. There are some skills that require a blood sacrifice. Like, for example, this Oleus guy has blood as power. It sacrifices 33% hit points, as you can see at the top of that spell. And if I don't click it here. If I make him cast it, you will see up here that he will lose 33% of his hit points. Now, there is, as I said, one more resource that we can use, and that's adrenaline. Those skills you see at the top of my skill bar, at the bottom, sorry, of my screen in the skill bar, there is dodge this. It requires 4 bits of adrenaline. They're called strikes of adrenaline. And adrenaline is gained by either attacking enemies with weapons or by receiving damage from weapons. So, for example, I can shoot this guy with my bow, and you see there's a little flame crawling up. So 2 flames, now we're at half, 3 flames, we're at 3/4, 4 flames, boom, we've got access to the skill. Now I can use it, it is active, I can shoot again, the skill gets used, and when I use adrenaline, it is important to know, when I use adrenaline, it burns all of the adrenaline for this skill specifically. So right now you see I have only 1 because I landed another shot, right? But if you have more adrenaline skills, those will keep their progress. They will only remove one strike of adrenaline from those skills, right? So for example, if I have this at 4, this, let's say, requires 4 adrenaline, and this requires 4 adrenaline, once I receive it, let me quickly do a couple attacks. If I then use dodge this, it will burn all of this, but these skills will only be 1 strike away from, being available again, right? It is pretty cool. It is also important to know that adrenaline is gained per hit on an enemy. So for example, if I use it and then I use my barrage, which hits multiple targets, I will actually get, you see, 3 strikes right at once in 1 attack. That is convenient because AoE, melee attacks or bow attacks and stuff like that will actually be a pretty good way for you to gain that adrenaline back. Now, we get to I'll actually keep armor for a bit later. Let's go to the damage types part of the video. There are multiple damage types in the game, and most of the time you don't see tooltips like in other games where it highlights a word or like gives you some kind of icon for it. You just actually like physically read it, right? Like for example over here, deals 21 fire damage. That fire damage is important. It is a type. I will explain in just a second. So there are multiple types. Specifically, we have air, earth, fire, water. Like, for example, water, by the way, is cold. I, for example, have these ice axe upgrades, which change the axe damage from physical to cold here, lightning, fire, whatever I want, really. And my bow, you see at the top there, it does fire damage instead of piercing damage, which is pretty cool, pretty neat. Speaking of physical damage, you have also 3 types, piercing, slashing, and blunt. The reason I bring all of this up and why I'm telling you about the damage types is because there are very, very many enemies in Guild Wars that are resistant to some types and vulnerable to other types. You pretty much will never know unless you try, I would say. But for example, in terms of physical, usually physical is kind of bundled together as like one thing. But one notable example is that plant enemies, like, freaking green grasshoppers and whatever, like trees, stuff like that, they're usually vulnerable to slashing. So you'll be doing about 20% more slashing damage if you just switch to an axe or, a sword or whatever. Those are all the sort of the elemental and the physical types of damage are the ones that have resistances to them. Like people have armor against them, some kind of resistance, and they can be reduced. There are also types that cannot be reduced, and they ignore armor. Namely, in this weapon description, you could see below energy plus 15, there's dark damage. So there is this one. If this character attacks with this weapon, that damage will never be reduced because it is armor-ignoring damage, right? It can be reduced by skills sometimes, like some skills, prevent damage or reduce it by a certain amount. That's fine, but armor itself will be ignored. Another one could be chaos damage, holy damage, maybe some other, I don't remember necessarily, but basically if it's not elemental or physical, it is armor-ignoring, yeah? One more thing I want to specify about damage types is if your spell or skill does not specify what damage type it deals, for example, this one deals 20 damage, not, fire damage or lightning or whatever, just 20 damage. This means that the skill is completely armor ignoring. There is no reducing this damage. Again, some skills can, right, protective skills, right, but not armor. There are certain classes that have a lot of access to such skills, namely, Necromancer and Mesmer. Most classes do have typed damage. There are some very rare exceptions, and I mean very rare, where the damage is typed, but for some reason it is armor ignoring still. Example of that is in Channel and Magic on Ritualist, Destruction. This spirit deals, doesn't matter what it says, but it deals lightning damage after it dies. Oh, sorry, actually, not this one, I think a different spell. But anyway, there is a skill that deals lightning damage when the spirit dies, and that damage is, for some reason, armor ignoring. Don't know why, just happens. It is very rare. I wouldn't go about hunting those skills, but if you occasionally find something like on the wiki stating that, you're in luck. That's cool. Now, we come to a pretty important topic, which was armor. I've already mentioned it. And specifically, when you're looking at your skills and you see a tooltip, like for example over here, 21 fire damage, this tooltip assumes two things. One, that your enemy that you're going to be using it against is about your level. So in my case, I'm level 20, and the enemy I'll attack is also, you see, level 20 at the top. It also assumes that the enemy has a caster level armor, and caster level means it is armor 60. I am here at armor 70. I'm medium armor, so to speak, but this guy is armor 60. So from what I just said, this guy is supposed to receive exactly 21 fire damage, right? Let's check it out. And boom, that is correct. Now, if you go up in armor, even though it is just 20 units, it doesn't seem that much, you're going to see that it makes a hell of an impact, and it actually reduces the damage by quite a lot. So armor, what I'm basically telling you is that armor is a very important thing to keep in mind, and armor ignoring damage is very, very potent, which is why Mesmers are pretty much meta in the game, in like high-end speedrunning game, right? Now, let's demonstrate. So we were dealing 21, and now we're dealing just 15. Not too great, right? Not too great. Keep that in mind. In terms of armor and characters in general, you have pretty much every spellcaster is running 60. You see the maximum value on armor is 60. Rangers and dervishes, the scythe guys, are doing 70 armor. They have 70 armor. And warriors and paragons are the heavy classes, and they have 80 armor. There is one more thing that is important in classes, four classes specifically, is that warriors have extra armor resistance or extra armor against physical damage, and rangers, you see here, I have at the very bottom of that armor description, in blue font, you see armor plus 30 versus elemental damage. Rangers get an innate sort of bonus to elemental damage on every single piece of gear, which is cool. Now, you would think that if I have this plus 30 versus elemental on every piece, that it would be, plus 150 because I have 5 pieces of armor. You would be wrong. The way damage works in this game is that I don't know why exactly or how precisely it happens, but every piece of armor corresponds to a different part of your body that can be hit. How do you know which part is going to get hit? Don't ask. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. The general tendency is that if an enemy is kind of low to the ground, it is going to try and hit your legs more. And if an enemy is tall, it is going to try to hit your upper body more, right? Something of that sort. But the reason I'm saying that is because, again, this is not plus 150 armor against elemental, but instead plus 30 just on each piece of gear. Again, using that same logic, you see on this piece of gear, I have plus 10 at the very bottom, while in a stance. This is a specific rune, an upgrade that I applied to this mask. It does not work on every single hit I take, because it is only on my mask, so only when I get hit in my head, which again, I don't know when or how that happens, only when I get hit in my head, that thing will trigger and I will get plus 10 armor against that attack, right? I'm saying this because if you do want to get, extra armor in a specific condition at all times, you have to buy 5 pieces of that upgrade and apply it to every single piece of your armor, okay? It's something I never knew until pretty much a month ago, right? It is a very niche thing. So, we are moving on to the next topic of today, and probably the last one, to keep it sort of brief, and it will be conditions. Unlike Guild Wars 2, if you're coming from that game, conditions here are not a main source of damage. You cannot build an entire thing made of conditions. Why? Because they work the same way as that health degen I just showed you, right? So you're pretty much capped at negative 40 HP per second if you like max it out, right? Which is not, it is not great. It might sound great at the beginning when you have like only 100 hit points, and then yeah, you will, you know, burn up really quickly. But at higher levels, when you have 400 HP and enemies have like 5, 8, 1500 HP, that will not do much, right? Because all of this degen is not percentage based. So with that said, there are like around 10 conditions, I want to say, 5 and 10. You can check them out by yourself if you want. All of this area is available at the Great Temple of Balthazar. You can just use the ship to travel here. And I'm going to just demonstrate what they have and specific gimmicks for some conditions. So here we go. The disease is a health degenerating condition. It is one of the few conditions that shows you the green health bar. And the gimmick of it is that it actually transfers between creatures of the same kind. So if you are, you know, a human and you have a bunch of your allies nearby, you can transfer this condition to your allies or to other creatures nearby if you just stand along with them long enough, right? That is pretty cool. It is also a bit annoying sometimes to deal with when you get diseased by some monstrous enemy and then you have to purge every single entity. But that's a cool condition. Next, Daze. Daze is a caster-hating condition. It takes your spells twice as long to cast, and you can be easily interrupted, which means any tick of damage can actually interrupt you, and will interrupt you. Normally, when you're casting something, you cannot be interrupted unless a skill says so. For example, you know, this distracting shot interrupts an action, right? Interruption effect, blah, 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 whatever. Dazed means that now any damage can interrupt you. It doesn't have to be a specific interruption skill. And look, now my Firestorm or Incendiary Bonds takes so long to cast that, you know, it is pretty much guaranteed that if you're being attacked, you will get interrupted. Another one, Weakness. Weakness is pretty strong against melee. It reduces your damage by 66 when you use your attacks. So for martial classes, Weakness is completely a killer. And it reduces your attributes by 1. That is important because weapons have requirements. For example, in this case, I have requires 9 marksmanship. If I don't have 9 marksmanship, I actually deal about like 2% of the actual damage. Instead of doing like, you know, whatever it is that I can do with my attack, you know, 35, I'll be doing 5, right? So if my marksmanship were, let's say, 9 instead of 16 here, and I got weakened, I would actually stop fulfilling that requirement, and my damage would drop not by 66%, but by like 99%. So it is a really potent condition. It is really good for, you know, denying enemy melee attackers and ranged and whatever. It is a good sort of crowd control ability. Poison. Similar to disease, it gives you -4 damage per sec, or -4 pips of health regeneration, and gives you a green health bar. It is not contagious. It just, you know, looks kind of similar, but it is not contagious. Blind. Blind is a melee hate attack again, or melee hate condition again. It makes you miss 90% of your attacks while the condition is active. Unlike Guild Wars 2, it does not get removed when when you're attacked. For example, right now, you know, I attack, I miss again, and I will miss again probably, and so on and so forth. It is a very, very bad condition. You do want to keep an eye out on it. It is not very frequent, but there are some areas when it is extremely prevalent, and you'll have to have, you know, some conditional removal or blindness protection. It also works against enemies, right? So you can apply that against their attackers, and then they'll do nothing to you. Right, moving on, we have, one more important thing I want to mention is that conditions in this game, again, unlike Guild Wars 2, they do not stack in intensity. So this poison guy cannot apply more poison to me and cannot make me lose, you know, 8 pips per second. Instead, it just stacks duration, right? Now, Cripple is pretty self-explanatory. You just move half as fast, and yeah, it's whatever. It is good for, you know, catching melee characters because then you can just run away from them. But other than that, it's okay. It's also pretty good actually for AoE setups because people, there is a thing in this game where people scatter when they are standing in AoE, like enemies scatter. So if you cripple them when you do that, you know, they'll scatter much slower and they'll take a lot more damage from your AoE spells. Now, burning, I've already showed you. It engulfs you in flames. It gives you a very fast degen. I think it's -7 pips, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty strong. If you just apply burning, that would be decent enough pressure on the enemy to just, you know, keep them occupied while you're doing more damage or doing whatever. Another one, bleeding, turns your bar pink and gives you -3 health degen. Nothing else. Classic damaging thing. Very, very common also. Deep Wound. This one is interesting because Deep Wound straight up takes away, I believe, 10% or about 8% of your max HP. Let me actually quickly check. It is at 325. Yeah, I was at 408. So it took about 8% of your max HP, which is cool because that's instant. It is like it's not resisted by armor or anything, it's just instant. So if you apply Deep Wound, the current and maximum HP get affected by it, which means that if somebody is, let's say, at 10 hit points and I apply Deep Wound, they will instantly die because that Deep Wound will also decrease their current HP. It is an extremely potent condition. It is really good for spiking single targets. And I have used this in some of my builds, namely the Spear DPS build on Ritualist is very cool with the Deep Wound. And finally, we get on to... Oh yeah, one more thing about Deep Wound. Obviously, when it gets removed, you restore your maximum back and also your current back. So if Deep Wound gets removed and somebody is low, you know, they'll be not as low anymore. Finally, we get to Cracked Armor. Cracked Armor effectively reduces your armor by 20. And this is cool. Again, minimum 60 because 60 is like the default sort of armor value that everybody has. So what I showed you earlier where my Firestorm was doing 15 damage to a warrior with 80 armor, this warrior has Cracked Armor. He's supposed to also take 15, but he will take... Oh, does he not have Cracked Armor? Interesting. Maybe he has more armor from... Oh yeah, he does have a shield, so... That is fine. He must have 100 armor at least then. But point being, Cracked Armor is an incredibly important spell, or a condition, sorry, to have in your team, especially if you're a martial class, or if you're doing a lot of elemental damage. But yeah, that wraps up the conditions. I hope that was pretty clear. They are a very good source of pressure and debilitation, but they are not a primary source of damage. So whatever you do, don't try to just purely focus on conditions. I think it may be fine to have one character to apply a bunch of AoE conditions, just to, you know, keep stuff happening. But it's not okay to have an entire team based on that. Now, with all of that, I believe... oh yeah, one more thing that I forgot to mention. Remember how I said that Deep Wound restores and removes your current HP as well? The same happens with energy when you have some gear that gives you energy and then you unequip it. For example, this is going to be a little bit difficult to show, but Oleus here has this staff that gives him plus 15 energy base, right? He also has the skill that makes him equip a bundle item. So I can zoom in over here. If they only stopped moving... Yeah, there you go. This bundle item. It is a spell that basically, you know, gives you a benefit while you're holding it, and then it does something when you drop it, right? There are a bunch of these spells. The point is that when he drops it, he will actually get his energy to 45, and he will get... The energy, I believe, will get restored by that amount as well. But if he, let's say, is wielding his... let me disable the skill. I'll show you actually exactly what's happening. So let me make him cast a bunch of spells and waste a lot of energy. And then I am going to make him equip that item. You will see that his energy will stay at 0 for a long, long time. Do it. Oh yeah, he needs 10 energy to do this. So he's going to spend 10 energy to cast a spell, and you see his energy is 0, and it stays at 0 for a while. That happens because he no longer wields a weapon that gives him 15 energy, and he wasted 10 to cast the spell. So he actually dropped his energy by 25 when he did that. And that's why he was completely useless for that period of time, right? This is important to keep in mind. You can actually, you know, mess yourself up like this a little bit. Don't worry, these spells that give you bundles are important, but you do have to be wary of drawbacks like that. And that, I believe, wraps it up for this video. Thank you very much. We'll come back next time with attributes and skills. And the most important, I think, advice for, for anybody who plays this game. So thank you. See ya.